Hi, my name is Trevor Fall, and I've been teaching English for 22 years. A lot of my focus and time was spent with academic English, helping high school and university students or adults get ready for academic material. But in the last few years, I've been also helping with lower level English speakers, both through volunteer programs and with helping newcomers settle in Canada. And I want to just share a little bit in this clip of some common mistakes or things that people working with newcomers that have not uh, been through a formal training program just maybe aren't always aware of as they're interacting and talking with people at various levels. So in Canada, we have a system of 12 numbers that we call Canadian language benchmarks. And when someone is at a level 0, that means that they're not literate, meaning even within their own language, they're not familiar with the alphabet or with uh, writing, or they can understand and communicate, but they're at a literacy level where if I would put words or sentences in front of them in English, they wouldn't understand what those are. Then we have levels 1 to 4 is called a stage 1, and then levels 5 to 8 is called stage 2, and levels 9 to 12 is called stage 3. Those that are at stage 3, so levels CLB, Canadian Language Benchmark 9 to 12, that's already considered university or academic levels of English. So this is what if you would commonly have referred to as advanced levels of English, or people that speak very similar to a native English speaker. The students that I'm more uh, focusing on today are those that are CLB 3, 4, and then CLB 5, 6, 7. So that range between 3 and 7, I've spent a lot of my career helping to understand and get better in their English. And there's a few things when we're speaking and listening that I want to just identify and highlight. So I'll start with a document that was originally produced. This is aimed at people working in the medical profession. So some of the examples focus in that area, but there's some good information here for all of us. So it talks about, and I've highlighted a few thoughts that are in blue. So the first idea here is giving clear instructions using short words and phrases. When students are at a beginner or intermediate level of English, if we're giving them lots of phrases and pieces of information, it's going to be overwhelming and a little bit confusing. So keeping information short and then having the students retell the instructions and or directions, or checking in with them just to see and make sure that what we've said is similar to what they're understanding. Using media or visual clues, so video or photos to help understand, and interacting, helping them when they're looking at new information. And so when we're speaking, a lot of times I've noticed that uh, people will say what's natural for us, and we're not thinking about how easy or difficult is that for the lower level English learner to understand. So providing pictures, having short phrases, checking in for understanding, and providing additional wait times when asking a question are all things that can be helpful. And that's where I've highlighted there, especially at the bottom with the additional wait time. Often, even for teachers that have been teaching for several years, a common mistake is to uh, ask a question, look around the room or interact with the person they're looking at or talking with, and then just go and fill in the answer. And it takes time and practice, but pausing, even counting in your mind to 8 or 10 or 15 to allow that time, because the person is formulating their thoughts and ideas before they're responding uh, to the question that you might be asking. There's 7 tips here. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them, and then I'm going to explain more details about the Canadian language benchmarks. So first of all, English is a difficult language. On a scale of 1 to 10, English is often seen as an 8 for people that are learning it. And that's based on a rating scale of how long does it take to learn a language and the length of time and the difficulty of the language itself. English has more than 2 million words, and on average, people who are studying English full time would take about 3 to 5 years to be able to get to an intermediate level. That's contrasted by, for example, Tagalog, Indonesian, Bahasa Malay, which is in Malaysia. Some of those languages are considered a 3 or 4 because within a year of studying full time, many people are able to read the newspaper, listen to the news, and comprehend a lot of what's happening around them. Spanish and French, often called the Romantic languages, are considered about a 6 to a 7. And so English is a little bit harder than that. Languages that are higher or at a higher scale than English would include Japanese, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, because there's a different language format or phonetic within it. And it's also very broad in what people are having to learn. But so it's not just, oh, I can listen and talk to people at, within a few months, and then they're picking up and speaking intermediate to advanced level of English. But for those of us that learned it as children or in a matter where we are now advanced speakers, it does take a lot of time and effort. And the lower the level of speaker, so the lower English ability that someone has, as they build on that, it takes longer and longer to move from level to level. So I'll provide this document. You can look through that on yourself, but it is a difficult language. So when we're speaking, we need to keep it simple. So they give examples here of using words good or give or take, more or less. And that's better than using more higher vocabulary words like positive, administer, increase, decrease. Keeping your sentences simple. And then as it identifies here, North Americans are often uncomfortable with silence, so we keep talking. Those are all things that can overwhelm someone, especially if you're in an hour or hour-long time with one-on-one or in a small group. If you as the leader or the volunteer that's speaking through most of that time, you need to just draw back a bit and work at letting the others speak and even draw them out. Because when we're talking and trying to fill in space, as it says here, we move towards more complex ideas and just keep talking and sometimes even jump from idea to idea. Seek and give and seek feedback. So even with simpler words and shorter sentences, I like what they've said here. There hasn't been communication until the receiver acknowledges it with feedback. So just because somebody is like, okay, or yeah, that's good, that may or may not mean that they've understood everything that we've explained or described. But just people nodding their head, you also have to watch the rest of their body language, their eyes, how they're sitting, are they shifting around, are they looking at you, are they looking around? Many different cultures express their, they don't say things as much, or their body language has higher value, I should say higher importance than what us in North America often look at. So I often look at a group, if I see people that are native English speakers and non-native, and when I watch them talking with each other, I can glance around and tell which people are uncomfortable or not understanding, just based on how their body language is sending out a signal. But when we're speaking, we might not be thinking about the other person's body language, or we might just be jumping from idea to idea. It is something that takes practice with people. Misunderstandings. Don't be as surprised when you're saying different things, and they give the example here. You might say, I want to help you, but the person might hear, I won't help you, because of how we've slurred the word together or how we've said it. So a totally opposite meaning to what we want. And then the person is now trying to figure out, well, what's wrong? Don't they like me? Or so even when we're speaking and thinking that what we're saying, or we know that what we've said is positive and clear, if the other person has misheard it or not heard parts of what we said, that's where it can be confusing or difficult for them. This is a favorite of mine, tip number 5, because I see it so often, and it's not just for those that are haven't been through formal training to teach English. Even in classrooms, teachers are often raising their voice and speaking and kind of trying to force the person to understand. When we're repeating information or someone's not understanding, raising my voice and speaking more forcefully does not allow that person. It actually intimidates them a little bit. We need to look then at how can we slow down or say the same thing in a different way. I'm often asked by my students, how come I can go to your class, Mr. Trevor, and I understand what you're saying, and then I go to the grocery store or I go to the bank and I don't understand the person talking to me? And for me, I have two secrets. One is that I have taught for so many years and been with so many students that over time I've just adjusted my speaking and my word choice to a simpler level. But the second secret is I've had an advantage of living and speaking in different cultures, and I have been married to my wife, who's not in a, even though her English is advanced and is good, she's not a native speaker from the time that she was born. And even a lot of teachers that are teaching English, when they're finished in the class, they go and talk to their colleagues who are native English speakers, or they go home and they talk with their husband or wife or their kids or others, all at a native English speaking advanced level. And whereas most of my surroundings, especially when I was living in other countries, my English speaking was in the office as well as in the streets and in the neighborhood and where I was at, I was speaking with people that were not native English speakers. And yeah, it says articulate your words in shorter phrases. I apologize if that's a little bit hard for you to see because of the font. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And this is something that over time you'll see good teachers doing, whether it's math or English or other things. It's not just enough to give some information and then move on. In English terms, we call it scaffolding. That's where we have details or information and we use that as a foundation and then we build on it, not just in the next class or in a future class, but even within that class. We come back to that idea or concept and we add more information, more vocabulary or grammar, etc. Think back to good teachers that you had, not in English, in other subjects. So in science and biology and mathematics, the good teachers that you had were those that explained it clearly, that were patient, and that interacted and were able to take something that seemed difficult and move it around and say it in several different ways in order to help you understand with examples and illustrations. And that's where in English as well, that's the area that we look to. How do we make things simple, but how do we repeat it and interact at that level? And I've sometimes had people say to me, well, Mr. Trevor, how do I, how do I do that? Like, how do I learn how to do that? Um, I think the key is when you're first starting, you have to be filtering what you're saying and just be more observant of what you're saying, how you're interacting with others, how you're asking questions, explaining information, the wait time of asking a question, waiting. It's more being self-aware, and that's what I want to with this video and with the next video about the different levels in listening and speaking and just understanding what students can do at various Canadian language benchmark levels. It's not to say, okay, now learn this and now you're going to be a great teacher. You're probably already a great teacher or a great volunteer because of your knowledge of English and your knowledge of the subjects. This is just helping you be more aware so that you're more effective when you're communicating, especially with those that are at a beginner or intermediate level of English. And then the last tip here, well, I guess there's a couple of tips, but avoid acronyms and idioms. Frequently, as I watch and listen to people, or even when I'm reading in the news, you'll be surprised how often in English we have different phrases and idioms and sentences that students don't understand and learners of English. And so in this case, because this is helping with medical professionals, it talks about medical culture, but also just in general. If I listen to the average Canadian for 10 or 15 minutes, I might hear 8, 10, 12 phrases that we understand and are common, but are not as clear for somebody who's been learning, or they haven't come to a level of understanding those. So just looking at how we can make things common, either making it simpler, or just again watching the learner's body language and seeing how are they reacting. If they're not feeling comfortable to ask you a question, are they at least shifting around or looking a bit confused? Because then we can circle back to that or ask for clarification, or explain more details, and then offering written information. And that's where I won't go into more detail, but usually you'll have handouts or other pieces of information that you can use as you're interacting with your volunteers. So I'm going to stop in this section, but I'll go into more details about listening and about speaking in the next video, which you can be seeing and understanding better. For example, at a CLB4, what does the average learner, what can they do? And then at a 6, at an 8, so that you get an understanding of the range. Because if I'm speaking at a CLB 9, 10 level up here, and I'm talking to somebody that's at a CLB 5, 6 level, that's where there's going to be confusion. And so the more that I can come down to the area of where that student or students are at, the more comfortable they are, the more motivated they are to learn, and the more progress they will make as they talk, and more confident they will feel. Again, think back to a math or a science class. I'm sure all of us experienced in junior high or high school a teacher that just kept talking and all of this giving information that was difficult and not clear, and us struggling, and that lowers our motivation very quickly. But to encourage people and to have them excited and motivated over several weeks, months of learning English, which is a several year process at best. And for many people, they've been studying and learning English for years. We want to be able to at least adapt a little bit closer to where their level is, and then guide them to higher levels and more confidence in learning to speak and listen to English from us as native speakers.